Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
So we shall move on to talking about realignment. One way to sort of frame this debate or discussion about where we see future realignment going is we have an actual, set in stone realignment announcement, or not realignment, but the new program, finding a conference home, and that was Augustana, who we had mentioned last month, announced its first head coach, former Husky player and assistant Garrett Urboyne. It was announced that the CCHA is going to be welcoming them as a conference member starting next year in 2023. It sounds like it was weird. It sounds like the first 2 years they're going to be playing a limited schedule. This was unclear to me as far as why that's the case. I think they said they're only going to be playing one series against each of the 8 other teams. I would assume this means they're not going to be involved in the postseason tournament. Because they're only playing 16 games, they're probably not going to be very good to begin with. Secondly, and they're not going to be playing enough games for them to be above last place, you'd think, because everybody else plays 26 games, I think. So, and I'm assuming, too, 9 teams for a playoff format is kind of a weird number to work with, where 8 is such a perfect number to work with. So I would assume that the first 2 years, they're just sort of affiliate member, if you will, not going to be involved in the tournament. If I hear different, I'll let you know, but that's my working assumption, is that the first 2 years, they're sort of easing into the conference and then becoming a full member with a full schedule would be the 25-26 season. But that brings the CCHA to 9 teams. Now, John Lucia.
9
teams.
9 times.
According to Kamish, the Don, Lucia, there is no immediate plans to get a 10th team. Now, they're going to need to get a 10th team.
Now you can say that there are no immediate, whether or not. Maybe it's still under review. Who knows?
That's possible. Or maybe they think that someone's going to be leaving the CCHA, and this will make it an even 8 again. Who knows? But obviously that started some rumor milling about who else are the CCHA, what other team are they going to get? You got Lindenwood, which is sort of in a geographical, similar area, or at least fits the footprint a little bit. You've got the Eastern schools. Stonehill is starting up next year. You've got Long Island, which still has not gotten a conference home. You've got Alaska Anchorage coming back this year, joining Alaska Fairbanks, both as independents this coming year. Arizona State has been an independent for 7 years, I think now, and now moving into their brand new NHL rink facility this coming fall. Still no word as far as where they are landing as a conference. Robert Morris coming back from the dead, not this year, but next year, 2023. And they've already been reinstated into the Atlantic Hockey. So there's some shuffling parts, and this sort of creates a scenario where how does the conference landscape look in the next 5 years, or even the next 3 years? There's a lot of possibilities. There's been rumors of Atlantic Hockey, they're at 10 teams right now. Adding Robert Morris in 2023 will put them at 11. Whenever you look at conferences that have odd numbers, and we've got several of them. We've got Hockey East at 11 members. Like I said, Atlantic Hockey will be 11 members starting in 2023. CCHA will have 9 members. Big Ten's at 7 members. The odd numbers create scheduling problems. Someone's got to be, on a weekend, one of those teams, if not more, it's not like the NCHC where you got 8 teams and you can have 4 conference games per weekend, and no one has to have an off week or play a non-conference game during that week. The odd numbers create scheduling issues. It creates problems as far as how do you deal with playoffs. So it makes much more sense, at least, to have an even number of teams in your conference. So I think that it's fair to say that there's going to be some shuffling in conferences, whether or not there's going to be teams moving from conferences, and certainly there's going to be conferences that pick up some of these members, just add them. There's possibilities of new conferences being created, just to set the playing field. The NCAA's rule for a conference, the minimum number of teams for a conference in order for that conference to gain an automatic qualifier into the tournament is 6 teams. So you have to have 6 teams in a conference in order to, for your conference champion to have an automatic berth at in the NCAA tournament. So keep that number in mind. There's these independents like Arizona State, the Alaskas, LIU, and Stonehill. That's 5 independents right now. It's not quite enough. And Lindenwood too. So I guess that makes 6. So I mean, there is the possibility of teams banding together. But imagine we haven't even mentioned Alabama Huntsville, which is sort of on hiatus. They've raised money, but they've said that they're not going to make any reinstatement of the program official until they find a conference home. And they've been struggling to find that. They've knocked on the doors of Atlantic Hockey. They've said no. CCHA kicked them out of their conference, or, well, they Minnesota niced them out along with the Alaskas when they formed when they formed the CCHA and killed the WCHA. That was sort of the whole point of that, was to just say we don't want to be in a conference with those teams anymore. So I don't see them joining the CCHA anytime soon. So there's that question mark as well. I don't know where you want to start. I scribbled some notes, and it's kind of like what I think might happen, which is more, like I said, incremental change, adding teams here and there, one team here, one team there. But then I kind of got crazy and I said, we're going to split off these conferences here, and I'm going to split the Ivies from the ECAC, and I don't know exactly where it all landed out. I sort of have an idea of what I think might happen versus what I would like to see happen, or what I think would be kind of cool to see happen. Why don't we... I don't know where you want to start. If you've got like maybe we'll start with, like, we could go conference by conference, or if you have like here's a hot take right off the bat. I'm going Penn State's going to Atlantic Hockey. Yeah, like if you got a hot take right off the bat.
Okay, I kind of have a hot take right off the bat.
Why don't you start with that then?
And it's going to be kind of funny, I think, because I don't think it's actually going to lead into anything else when it comes to realignment. But when you were talking about, 7 years for Arizona State and no conference home.
This
and
is
it
a good
seems
start.
like they can kind of, it feels like they would be wanted.
Yes. And I think they are.
And if you're Arizona State, do you want to be in a conference? And I think this is kind of an interesting, especially if you're starting to get conferences with odd numbers, they're going to have off weeks, towards the end of the season, because you have to. And so you want to schedule them. So I think the biggest issue is because, it's a lot harder to fill games in, February and March, because that's when the conference season is really going. Well, if conferences are stuck on odd number of teams, then yeah, you're going to have a little more leeway to go ahead and kind of get in and out of the, a wider range of conferences that you're going to be able to play. And I think Arizona's kind of in an interesting spot because people will want to play Arizona, both at Arizona or have Arizona State come there. So I think it's actually interesting that I don't know if Arizona State wants to be in a conference. And, really the only main benefit I would say is an automatic bid. But if you still have, you win your games with the pairwise and everything, you're still going to, make it to the tournament. There's still plenty of runway, plenty of avenues for you to get there. So depending on how the rest of the conferences fall, and if there are odd number of teams where everybody is, every conference is going to have somebody off, I think you're going to have kind of your pick of the litter also of who you want to schedule during those months and still have a decent chance to make it into the tournament. So that's kind of my hot take. I don't think they're going anywhere.
You're going to stay as an independent.
I think so.
Yeah, that's where I would have.
I think if they wanted to be in a conference, they'd be in one by now.
Yeah, I think that I don't have any inside information as far as what they are desiring as a program. I would.
We don't have inside anything.
I know, but I would assume that they want to be in a conference tournament. They did apply to the NCHC. That was, I think, during the first run of the podcast. That was 2016-ish, I think. And they were told no. But a lot has changed since then.
We're the original old boys club, so
yeah, we'll get to that. But a lot has changed since then. And most notably, they have a facility now, a viable facility. Like I said, 5,000 seat arena on campus. That they didn't plan on this, but the Coyotes will be playing there as well the next 2-3 years. And so I think that makes them an attractive program. I have them going to the Big Ten, which would not. I would not like. I don't like that. This is in my what I think is going to happen. Now, do I'm not going to say I would say 90% that they're definitely going to go to the Big Ten. It's probably closer to 50-50. I could definitely see them saying no, but I mean there's just some hints that I've had over the years that makes it seem like it's logical that they're going to go there. I mean, they played the COVID year, the 2020-2021 season. Arizona State played an entirely Big Ten schedule that year. It was all on the road. But that was the only way that they could really find teams to play, period. So that's a willingness not only from their perspective, but from the other 7 Big Ten teams that will let you in. And sure, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's a once in, that season's never going to be replicated ever again. But, that's something that they wouldn't have, the Big Ten schools wouldn't have offered that opportunity to just any team. They're not going to offer that to Stonehill or Long Island in 2020. Arizona State sort of checked off a lot of the similar boxes to them. Just the size of the school. They're a known commodity. Whereas even like a North Dakota, even though North Dakota is a powerhouse from college hockey standpoint, they're not on the same sort of national name recognition as a school that Arizona State is. And I think that is more important to the Big Ten than the hockey aspect itself. The other thing, like I went to the game last year in their old facility. They're using for their home games. They contract with the Big Ten for officials, for their referees, and that's another sign of going through those sort of logistics. As an independent, you're kind of on your own for that, but that's a sign to me that says that the Big Ten's willing to do business with Arizona State. In this, I don't know how long they've been doing that, but it's another little sign of reciprocation between the Big Ten and Arizona State as far as we want to have a relationship with you. So
I want to say that they had a relationship with the WCHA.
I think in the early days they did. I mean, their first year or two, they barely played any home games. It's really only
Yeah.
been in the last few years that they've played a decent chunk of games, and I still think last
And I think
year,
it was also a lot for like supplementary discipline. Like
Yeah, for
if some
suspensions.
board has to oversee some kind of a suspension,
Sure.
they would use the WCHA to
I
do
think since that COVID year, all that kind of stuff has been handled by the Big Ten for Arizona State.
I think so too. Yeah.
So that's another sort of hint that makes me believe that that's a possibility. So that's where I have them going. As far as like my sort of, they're not going in any conference would be the Alaskas, which again, I root for the Alaskas. I mean, it's like I want the Alaskas to succeed. I think it's cool that college hockey has a presence in Alaska. It's just from the realistic standpoint, again, we're looking at, it's kind of similar to what I said about Huntsville. The CCHA moved mountains. It literally resurrected a defunct league in order not to have the Alaska teams in their conference. So I don't see any way that they were going to go back to the CCHA. The NCHC. Do you really see the NCHC offering Fairbanks a place in their conference?
That's why we split off from the WCHA.
Yeah, right. I just don't see
We
that
wanted
happening.
like-minded schools.
Same
I think was
even
the-
more so with the Big Ten. They ain't going to the Big Ten. So those are the three Western leagues. I don't see them playing. I know Atlantic Hockey has been fudging the geography of the United States for a while now with Air Force and whole factions of teams not close to the Atlantic Ocean in that conference. But still, I don't see if let's say Atlantic Hockey were to add one or both of the Alaskas, at least change your name. But beyond that, I don't see that happening. I just don't see. I don't see it happening. Certainly, I don't see both the Alaskas in the same conference. I mean, this would be one of the ones where I'm saying, what it would be good for college hockey if
Yes.
the Alaskas were each in their own conference. I mean, it was perfect the way it was with the WCHA having Anchorage and Fairbanks in the CCHA. So actually, I think it's good for the teams in the conferences as well. You still have the Alaska exemption, which means all your travel, if you play 2 games in Alaska, those games don't count against your NCAA max. You can get 2 free home games by going to Alaska, and I think teams take advantage of that. They'll play 2 more games if you let them. And that really so having them in 2 separate conferences allows that opportunity for, a dozen other teams to schedule extra games on the schedule, which I think is a benefit. But the thing is, especially over the last 10 years in college hockey, it's very clear that these schools and these conferences as entities, they're not looking out for the whole of college hockey when they make their conference decisions. They're, for better or worse, they're making these decisions based on what's best for their programs. And because of that, I don't see the Alaskas finding a spot. I think the best hope for them to get a conference is to wait out a situation when you have at least six teams that are clearly in the West, like west of Denver, that they join hockey or that they go D1 in hockey, and that those teams form a Great West. I think that's what it was an 80s version of this, like the Great West Hockey Conference. But I don't see that happening very soon. I mean, we've had like UNLV, Las Vegas. I think they're on Alaska Anchorage's schedule this year as exhibition games, because obviously they're not D1, they're a club team. Rumblings with the University of Arizona here in Tucson, but nothing above just rumbles. No real steam to any of these rumors, and because of that, I don't see a groundswell of West, like true West Coast teams going D1 in the next decade. And because of that, I mean, that's a long time. I mean, and the other thing for these conferences, like Fairbanks, they were around last year and they took the COVID year off, but Anchorage took the year off last year. and they're on real dire straits. I mean, I don't see it. I don't see a conference offering Anchorage a position for lots of reasons, and one of them is we don't know the long-term viability of that program. It's like Huntsville. It's kind of a catch-22 that they're in, as far as they can only go D1 if they get a conference. Well, no one's really going to give them no one's going to offer them a position in the conference if they're this great question mark of how long are they going to survive. It's going to be a year-to-year thing where they got to raise $1 million just to keep the program's lights on. That's a tough sell for a conference to offer a position, offer a slot in their conference for a program that's just not stable, and that hasn't proven that they can just at least just exist, much less be competitive. So I think that's a problem for the Alaska. So as much as it pains me to say it, because I would love to have viable programs in Alaska, I don't see a conference offering them a slot, and I don't above or other than a new conference forming that includes them. What I'll say is I don't see a current conference offering the Alaska's a position.
Yeah, everyone did everything they can to get rid of them so they don't have to play those teams.
Right.
So offering them a spot at the table is a little far-fetched. Yeah, and that's their only hope, is to hope they can, maybe they're going to try to get all the independents scraped together, get your 6, and get an automatic bid, and therefore become a conference. That's, I guess, a possibility. That's the only possibility. Is it a viable one? I don't think so. There's a lot that goes onto it. So it's, I think it's a bummer because, my view on it is that we need to lift the college game, not just specific programs, and, rightly or wrongly, and I know I've talked about this in a previous podcast, is everyone's going to look out for their own, and, no one's going to give them a helping hand, or no one's going to, try to do what they can to help other programs. Is it their obligation to? That's, kind of up for debate. So that's where we're at. And yeah, I agree with you. And I don't know how long these programs are going to be viable. But it's, it's got to be tough to recruit under those conditions too.
Right.
And that's kind of, the other side of this. They're going to be, who's going to go to that, a program like that with, who knows if next year, we're going to be able to skate here.
Right.
Maybe use it as a stepping stone for the transfer portal, if that's an option. But other than that, it's going to be a tough road to hoe there for the Alaska teams.
True. How about, what do you got for? I mean, now we got Augustana as the 9th CCHA team. I just went ahead and added Lindenwood to be the 10th team for them. It was them in St. Louis. I mean, it's not a perfect fit in their current footprint. It's a little bit of an outlier, but I think that you could spin that as a positive as well. Like you want to expand your footprint, not just add teams that are already in the footprint. This would be a way to stretch the league down to a different state, different region. And I think St. Louis is it's let's say it's got its advantages over like a Bemidji as far as traveling there. There's an airport very close, and so I think from that perspective, I think it makes sense. It sounds like CHN did an interview with their coach, and it sounds like I thought he said their entire first year is going to be on the road. I thought that their facility in Lindenwood, which is like the Blues practice facility, and that's going to be hosting a regional. I'm assuming that's the same Lindenwood facility that they're using as their home rink. You think if it's good enough to host a regional, it'd be good enough to host regular season games. But I thought he said that they're playing their entire season next year as on the road, similar to what Arizona State did in the COVID year, which will make it a challenge to say the least. But they're a wild card because I could see them going in several different spots, and I think they're a attractive program. They're in a much different boat than the Alaska teams or Huntsville is, I would say. What do you foresee the Lindenwood Lions? Where do you see them landing?
Yeah, like you said, this one is kind of tricky. And originally, I had them in the NCHC.
Really?
I do think that this, like you said, expanding your footprint and going down to St. Louis, I think that, or the St. Louis area, could kind of be a good market for the conference, and a national, you know, be on CBS Sports, with whatever that gives you, I guess. But
Gives you Starman.
yeah, maybe a little bit of a rivalry, I guess, with Omaha. Something can brew kind of there. So that's where I originally had them before Augustana, because when I was doing the whole realignment and everything, I kind of got a little too focused on regionals or regions in general, like this group of teams, this group of teams, this group of teams. And I as I was kept going back to it, I kept stepping back and going like, well, out east, it's not the case. I mean, you've got, you look at Massachusetts or whatnot, you've got many different conferences representing in Massachusetts, and everything is, seems to work out for them. So why wouldn't we have different conferences for everyone for teams in Minnesota, even though that hasn't been the norm? And again, that's very viable for nice non-conference games, the help with NCAA tournaments and whatnot. So yeah, I originally had Augustana and both Lindenwood in the NCHC. I kind of look at those two teams as kind of a package deal, I guess, and I think that's just the easiest. So I do see them going to the CCHA. Again, that rounds out to 10 teams, so I think that's kind of an easy fit. Although I would like to see them in the NCHC. I would like to see the NCHC expand. So I think that would have been a good fit.
Well, if you're talking about the NCHC expanding, what do you got there then? Like let's move on from just specific programs to, you said you want to see the NCHC expand. What do you see? Who are you adding, or who are you maybe swapping out for other teams?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Obviously, the big elephant in the room is the Western Michigan and Miami and Bemidji and Mankato. I think that's kind of an easy switch along the lines that I think works out well for both the CCHA and the NCHC. But again, that's where I focus maybe a little bit too much on regionality of everything. But yeah, I mean, I originally had Augustana in the NCHC as well. So that's where we'd bump up to 10 teams in that instance. I don't see the NCHC doing that, and really, I don't see the NCHC going to 9. I think they're going to do everything they can to just stay at 8 and stay out of anything that falls.
Yeah.
But that's, who's to say what Miami thinks or what Western Michigan think. They might have different plans.
Yeah, I think that even before Augustana announced their move to the CCHA, I would not have picked them on my what I think is going to happen scenario to go to the NCHC or Lindenwood. I think there's good points made about, especially Lindenwood. I like that argument about getting into that St. Louis market. I think it's a good well to tap for a conference. The problem is that they just need to get established at the D1 level. I think for a conference like the NCHC let's say if Lindenwood was Arizona State right now, that's, I think, would be viable for the NCHC to say, okay, here's a program that's made a tournament or two and has a nice facility that's lined up, and like I said, in a decent spot geographically. then I just wouldn't see them bringing 2 D1 newcomers in Augustana and Lindenwood. We don't know how good or bad. I mean, I would not assume they're going to be, like I said, if Lindenwood, especially if they're playing the entire year on the road, not expecting them to be all that great for this year and probably for the first few years. I just don't see the NCHC knowing that this program or this conference was founded on "we are the best." I don't see them
and loves to pump their chest about
puffing the chest out about, we'll bring the 2 new kids on the block into the program, unless they wanted a couple of doormats to beat up on for a couple of years. But we already have Miami and CC, so and the Miami and Western thing. I agree with you as far as in my realistic scenario. I didn't see the NCHC moving from 8. I had them staying put. I've never heard. I've heard some rumors about Miami being restless. Between Western and Miami, I'd say Miami has a greater chance. I could see them saying, especially, let's say they finish in last place again next year or the year after that, being like, you know what, we're sick and tired of being 8th place in this league. Why don't we go over the CCHA and we can maybe compete for 2nd or 3rd? I wouldn't be shocked if that happens. I really haven't heard that from Western. Western seems committed as far as they want to be in the NCHC because that sort of steps up their recruiting game. And they've made a couple of tournaments in the last few years, and I think they're on a good trajectory with the new coach. And I like to see them as a package deal. I don't see, like, if Miami leaves, then Western is just in the NCHC by itself. They probably, even though they might be happy with the NCHC now, I think they like the fact that they have Miami there with them. That's relatively close. It's at least one bus ride trip for them, whereas everything else is a plane ride. So in my realistic scenario, I had the conference staying put. In my sort of fantasy world scenario, I had them going to 10, but I didn't do Mankato and Bemidji. I did Mankato and Bowling Green because I figured that Bowling Green would be a sop to Western and Miami. Like, those teams probably wouldn't like it if they added 2 more Minnesota teams, which is two more plane trips for them. You give them Mankato, which I think is the plum of the deal. Like, the NCHC would want them because they're kind of a sexy program right now. You give them Bowling Green to get it to 10, so you don't have the odd number. But also, that's a 3rd Eastern team that it's an in-state rival for Miami. Kind of gives them an extra rival in that neck of the woods. And like, even though I don't really love Bowling Green I don't think they really fit the NCHC from the sexy national, like, we're making the tournament, like, tournament competitive kind of type of team. And I don't think their facility is all that great. Like, in my mind, I would love to see Michigan Tech back in the Huskies conference. But from I just was making the Bowling Green move from the geography of that fits best for Western and Miami, whereas Michigan Tech kind of doesn't. So again, my percentage of possibility of this happening is relatively low. I would not be shocked if Mankato got into the NCHC at some point. It's just because of how high they have ascended on the national scene. I wouldn't be surprised if those talks have been happening over the years.
Wasn't there recently, and within the last few years, that didn't Mankato or something came out about Mankato asking the NCHC?
Yeah, I think that was the same time that Arizona State did, and certainly it was Mankato that wanted to get in, and they were told no. But again, that was before the times that they had made multiple Frozen Fours and national title game appearances. From the NCHC,
can you imagine the NCHC if they were in the mix as well? If they did get in, that would have been nuts.
We had a debate there because you thought they were going to be like first place in the NCHC this year, and I was like, I thought they were going to be like 4th. For that reason alone, as far as we can find out how good Mankato is, if it's in the NCHC, I would like it to happen. There's just not. It's just weird that I don't think there's a second team that screams, because I think the NCHC is a little unusual. Yeah, I don't know. At least in the West, the NCHC is like the conference that prides itself on ice success, and I think that's sort of like the main factor in what they think their conference should be. Whereas I think, Big Ten is sort of hamstrung, even though they've gone outside the mold and added Notre Dame, but they're sort of hamstrung. And I say that it's possible that Arizona State is added as well, but they're hamstrung as effective. It's Big Ten schools are part of the Big Ten conference. And the CCHA, I think, is a little bit more of a regional model, much more so than these are like-minded schools.
Like-minded schools.
Concept that the NCHC does. So that's why I think that a Mankato move, like let's say Mankato wins a national title. I mean, they could have done it this year. It came very close. I think that improves their resume to the NCHC, but I don't see it happening in the next few years unless there is, a big cataclysm that I'm not even anticipating, a big shuffle. But yeah, what did you have like out east as far as we see like Hockey East is at 11 teams? I don't think that is ideal for them, and I would assume that they're looking to add a team. There's not really a team that screams. I know Holy Cross has been rumored. Holy Cross's women's team is in the women's Hockey East. I think that has led some people to think that that Holy Cross would make sense jumping from Atlantic to Hockey East. And so there's that possibility. That seems like a stretch to me. Bentley is another team from Atlantic Hockey that's just got a new facility. I could see them moving up to, if not Hockey East, ECAC is another kind of step up from Atlantic Hockey. But as far as the Hockey East goes, there's not a real, in my sort of fantasy world, I'm thinking from the NCHC's model of best competition or like a on ice product, like get Quinnipiac from the ECAC to the Hockey East, which I think would be kind of cool. But what'd you think about, and then I think Atlantic Hockey, which is I think the biggest set of dominoes as far as they are already going to expand. They've announced the move to add Robert Morris, which would get him to 11 teams. Re-add them, and that kind of makes it a little different. But there's also rumors that Utica could move. They're a D2 program now. They could move up to D1. They hosted the Atlantic Hockey Conference tournament this year. So again, that's another sort of one of those hints that you think that they might have a home kind of lined up or working to grease the wheels, so to speak. So if they're at 11 with the addition of Robert Morris, you've got Long Island, which is out there. You think that they kind of make sense to join Atlantic Hockey? They're at least a school that can see the Atlantic Ocean, which I think would be a positive. Can't say that for Air Force or even Canisius or Niagara or some of the teams of the Western Mercyhurst. So there's the possibility of, in my sort of fantasy world for Atlantic Hockey, you split that into two. Yeah, you get to 12 teams. You add Long Island, and then we're assuming we're adding Robert Morris for 2023. So this wouldn't be for a couple of years, but then you have 12 teams, and it kind of splits into two nice halves of West and East. Again, I think once you split it, you got to change the name of the conference. Atlantic Hockey West. That's like a hat on a hat. You can't have that name there, but just humor me for a second.
Like it.
Yeah,
just
go with the chaos. Like Atlantic Hockey Pacific region. But you could have something like Air Force, Mercyhurst, Niagara, Robert Morris, Canisius, and RIT. Kind of fits all in the West division, and then the East would be AIC, Army, Sacred Heart, Bentley, Long Island, and then Stonehill, which is my other team, the newcomer from the Boston area. That's as well. So you could have 6-team leagues. You could split that off into either two divisions of the same conference. You could split that off into 2 separate leagues and each get an automatic qualifier from both, because you're reaching that magical 6 number. There's also, RIT, I think, is one of those programs. I've heard rumors of them trying to move up into ECAC or Hockey East. They have another sort of newish, nice facility. I think they're geographically positioned well to possibly grow out of Atlantic Hockey. I think their on-ice product has been okay. They've made several tournaments over the years as well. You got Air Force, which is sort of the big sore thumb there. Like, they're in Colorado, and everyone else is at least on Eastern Standard Time. From what I've heard, they love being in the same conference as Army, because the service academy kind of deal, service academies. They like being in the same conference, but I don't see how that is something that, you could still play them in non-conference. I don't see how that is like you have to be in the same conference with them.
I think a non-conference, like splitting them up and putting them in non-conference and then having some kind of major, services battle between those two, like I think that's a pretty sweet idea.
Yeah.
Like, just, one series between the two, and then, for some kind of trophy. I'm a sucker for trophies and like tournaments and whatnot. So I think having something like that, I think it'll be one of those cool traditions to start.
Well, Army does play the Canadian Army in a exhibition every year. I don't know if they did it over the last COVID year or two, but it's like the Royal Army of Canada or something. They usually play like around the Christmas break, but and I guess it's a big deal for the Army hockey faithful whenever the Canadian Army comes in.
The Mounties,
that's right.
Dudley Do-Right's coming down to play us.
Yes, right. It's like that John Candy movie, Canadian Bacon.
Canadian Bacon.
That's a good one. But it's like, and I think what you were saying as far as regional versus like the impulse to have conferences that were based on geography. I agree. I think that's the best setup. And I think that's how the WCHA and the CCHA, that's how those leagues were built, especially like like after the 80s and 90s. You saw St. Cloud get in the late 80s. That's when Anchorage and Fairbanks were added to those leagues in the early 90s after being independents for close to a decade. And so I think that was the model then, and I think that still is the best model, especially for college hockey. But now it seems that doesn't seem to be the number one rationale across the board. So because it's like Air Force would, if we're talking geography, Air Force would be perfect in the NCHC. It would fit the best in the NCHC because you already have 2 Colorado teams and 1 across town for them in Colorado Springs with CC. So you have 3 teams in Colorado in college hockey. Wouldn't it make the most sense to have all 3 of them be in the same conference? The problem there is, though, same as what we've mentioned about other schools, I just don't see how the NCHC looks at Air Force and says you're on the same level of a program as the rest of us, and you can make all the Air Force over St. Cloud in the NCAA tournament jokes as you want, and we deserve them. But I just don't see that happening, even though I think that would be a natural move. So just the impulse of going from...
If you're going to use that argument for St. Cloud State, there's a lot of teams that you would put in the NCHC.
Yeah, the NCHC featuring AIC and and Air
Ferris
Force
State
and Ferris
and-
F and State. Yeah, it would be quite the league.
Don't use that criteria.
But yeah, I'm sort of, my big thing was I had to fight the impulse to just do it by logical geography, and because that's not really the motivating factor for a lot of these conferences now. What else do you got? I mean, I split off the ECAC into the Ivies.
Yep.
I mean,
I want to go back first and talk about. I want to go back first and talk about Atlantic hockey, and I do think that Atlantic hockey is tricky as well because they have a cap for a certain number of scholarships they can give out.
that's right.
Now, college hockey, I think, is 18. I want to say is the cap.
I believe that's correct.
And then for the longest time for Atlantic hockey, their cap was only 12.
That's right.
I believe. Maybe it went up to 13. I don't know, but like, so a lot of the realignment I think is really going to depend on which one of the Atlantic hockey teams are comfortable or want to move up past that 12 threshold. I know a lot of, talk about, just place all these new teams in Atlantic hockey because they're kind of the afterthought because they're always, lesser teams that are, the afterthoughts of college hockey, really. But, that I think can kind of hamstring some of these programs by only giving out those scholarships. So you're looking at ones like RIT, which I think is one of those schools that want to give out more and want to invest in more. That's kind of why we're hearing a little more rumblings about wanting to move out of and into a different conference. If they do split off, or if they do a 6-6 again, I know I said this last week. I would imagine that there's going to be some talk about now we have too many conferences for a 16-team field, too many automatic bids. They got to raise it to 8. And I think there's always going to be that push-pull when it comes to those conferences. So I think it's one of those things where they're going to have to make darn sure that that cap is going to stay, or that floor is going to stay at 6 teams to get that automatic bid.
And
So
I wonder,
it's
I think that's a good point, and I wonder what would happen if.
and that puts
if-
the Big Ten in a huge pickle.
I think it's easier for them to just say, okay, we'll add a team, whether or not that's Arizona State or somebody else. It would be a pickle, but I think it's an easier pickle to solve than say.
It's an easy pickle to solve in a sense of, solving it is easy because you'd have a lot of people who want to be in your league.
Right.
But at the same time, your high horse mentality is going to be completely.
I think they can.
Your
maintain
ego
that.
is going to be shot.
I think they can maintain that. If they're getting forced to, I think they can sort of play some victim game and
Play the victim.
and handle that. But the thing is, if that rule is installed after new conferences of 6 teams are formed, so let's just go with my little ECAC thing of the Ivies, which there's 12 teams in the ECAC. Half of them, 6, are Ivy League schools, and the other half are not Ivy League schools. This has been rumored over the years too. Just split that off into the 6 Ivy. Just have the Ivy League be a separate league, and then have the other 6.
That doesn't start until November.
Right? Yeah. And wants to play less games. They only play 29 games for some reason. They got all that extra studying to do. But let's say that happens. We got the 6-team Ivy League. Now we're saying the Big Ten has not as much wiggle room to just add any other team. Ivy League especially doesn't have. I mean, Ivy League ain't getting Notre Dame as an affiliate member. They are only plucking their teams from the literal Ivy League of universities, which are 9 or 10 schools. So if you have these split off leagues that are 6 teams, and then they say, well, we got to raise the minimum for an automatic qualifier, then the Ivy League's like, well, there's no way that Penn or Columbia is going to join our league, and there's no real way that we can have affiliate members into the Ivy League. So we just got to go back into the ECAC. We got to put our tail between the legs and try to do that again. It would be interesting if that is going to, because I don't think that's, I think that's a somewhat realistic thing that the NCAA could do is to raise that minimum number of teams for an automatic bid, because once one league does that, let's say the Ivy League does that, well, then what's stopping the 6 independents that we said from just saying we'll start a 6-team league? I mean, once one group of 6 does that, it's possible then the Atlantic says we'll split into 2 and we'll get another cheap auto bid for that. You could have a real sort of domino effect. Maybe I'm falling into the slippery slope fallacy here, but without legislation on the books that says, without raising the minimum number of teams to qualify for an automatic qualifier, we could be sitting here in 10 years with not 6 leagues, but 10 leagues. And when that's the case, then, that's 10 automatic berths. And, with 3 of them being, from 2 Atlantic hockey conferences and 2 ECACs. And so then you're at the at-large bids for the tournament are dwindling away, and the big schools that sort of are most in position to have those at-large bids are not going to like that. And so I wonder if that's a preemptive move that says we'll do that to stop any sort of possibilities of these small leagues taking over or proliferating. Instead of that, we'll kill that dream before it starts and say we got to go to 8 teams, which I don't know if that, I kind of like that, actually. I kind of like an 8-team league as being the minimum for a automatic qualifier. So
I do too. But I think, kind of the main reason, maybe not the main reason, but, a big reason why I think that opens the door to more breaking off is because they have seen how well it works out not having a central tournament for a for a conference tournament. Like all, with the success the CCHA and the Big Ten have done by going back to on-campus sites, you got a full house rocking. You've got the atmosphere that you want. Sometimes, if it's a 45-minute review for a goal, maybe it's a different story, but it's, you might have, there's a lot less overhead than obviously a neutral site tournament where you have to run that and whatnot. So plucking 6 teams, I think, to form their own league, that is maybe a little bit of an easier task. Now, what does that do though with the referee pool? That's the big question there, is then you're going further deeper in the referee, and people already don't like referees in the league. So now you're digging deeper, so it's going to be even more consistent. More leagues are going to have worse referees. So it's, and is that good for the game and whatnot? So that's where all of this realignment, that's what made everything so hard when I was trying to track everything and move everything around, is I kept thinking of all of these other different little nuances that it's like, oh man, I can't imagine how, now you're trying to, train how many more referees to be up to a certain standard. So I don't know. We can look at Hockey East. What's the, cut half of them, put 6 teams. I just feel like, yeah, they're if those dominoes start to fall, I think fairly quickly they're going to say, hey, we gotta do something about this, because having a really strong having too many teams above a really strong second place team in a different conference is not good for the game overall.
Yeah.
And I'm also not a fan of expanding the field past 16.
Oh yeah.
So
absolutely. If it was to me, I would shrink the field, but that's a topic.
You'd go
for
back down
another
to
day.
12, or
Yeah, probably. But that's a topic for a different day. Yeah, and as you said, like it's very easy for me to we'll split off in a 6 here and using it on a sheet of paper and split off 6 here and split off 6 there. The logistics of that are, well, then you're creating not just a league of 6 teams, you're creating another sort of bureaucracy that is entailed with that. So you're hiring there's another commissioner for that league, and a league office.
I'll do it.
What do you do with the streaming package or the media?
I'll do it. ESPN
There's
Plus.
a whole.
Who cares? Just sell it to you.
A couple of. Well, I'm just saying the Ivy League, I'm sure, could handle that no problem. But if you're having starting a league with Fairbanks and Anchorage and Huntsville, a little tougher sledding, I think, when you're dealing with programs or schools of that stature. So I don't know if we really solved the realignment puzzle here. I mean, we moved some pieces around, and we had some hot takes and some maybe here's and maybe there's, and hopefully it was a enlightening discussion, and definitely something to keep an eye on for the next few years.
I'll ask one final question.
Yeah.
What do you think will be the first domino? Like, what do you think that there's going to be something that's going to trigger everything kind of falling into place or shuffling around or anything along those lines? Is there something that you see is like
a big one, like
big
Augustana, Augustana going to the CCHA didn't really blow anything up. You're thinking of I would say it's going to start with Atlantic hockey, because I think once they get, and I think this Utica might be a factor in that. And I tried when I was doing my realignment here, I just was sticking to the teams that have officially announced movements to D1. So we've heard rumblings about Utica, or for that matter UNLV that we mentioned. I just stuck to these are the teams that officially are in NCAA Division 1.
Well,
but
because
I think
there's also talk of Saint Aslam. There's
Anselm. Yep. Yeah.
And that's them. So I mean, that's we can go down quite the long.
So I would say once Atlantic even just gets to 12, which I think LIU is one where I think their big hang up is a facility. If they work that out, if they find a facility that's viable, once Atlantic gets to 12, and then perhaps has another perhaps potential 13th member, then you're going to think of, we got to split into 2. Like I said, I think there is a natural geographic split between these teams. You could even have some of those, the Mercyhurst, Niagara, Robert Morris. These teams, if you really want to go chaos, these are schools within driving distance to Bowling Green. You could see some of those Eastern CCHA members could maybe join up with some of these Western Atlantic hockey schools. Could form a Great Lakes, a Lake Erie conference.
NCHC members, Mankato and Canisius. How about that? That's the ball
only
you're gonna throw
after
Western.
after Canisius wins its first natty. I think that's the only stipulation there. But where do you see that big first, big Jenga piece? Is it Atlantic? Is it somewhere out east? Is it somewhere out west? Where do you see it?
Yeah, I also, I don't want to just sit here and agree with you, but yeah, I also feel like something in Atlantic hockey is going to change. But if anything does happen with CCH, or not CCHA, but with ECAC and Hockey East, I think there can be some reshuffling going on there. As well. So I do feel it's going to be out east. I think we're kind of in agreement when it comes to the biggest thing that would have to happen, I think, for anything to fall would be the Alaska schools getting in. And I just don't see that happening. We're both in agreement there. So I think that's so far out of the realm of a possibility that I'm not even going to really entertain that. So that's why I think that something's going to happen out east, and some programs are going to be reshuffling. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's ECAC is going to be involved in that, but I want to say it's Atlantic Hockey going to be the catalyst.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, the big realignment from 10 years ago, the East was relatively untouched.
Yeah.
I mean, ECAC was completely untouched. Hockey East added Notre Dame and then lost them a couple years later. And Atlantic Hockey, I don't believe they were affected at all by that either. So it makes sense for the first big round of realignment 10 years ago. That was the Western realignment. Now, perhaps this is the Eastern realignment. And part of it's, change is not necessarily bad. And part of the reason that we're having this discussion is that we've got some newcomers. We're talking about Augustana, Lindenwood, Stonehill, LIU. It's a good problem to have. Where do we put these new programs into conferences? There was years there that all that college hockey was doing was getting rid of teams, or
reinstate Wayne State.
Findlay. There was a couple of other. Iona, I believe, had a college hockey team. Yeah, you could go back into that. As well.
We also forgot the really big news, or maybe we did it in the last podcast. I guess I don't remember. But Illinois.
Oh yeah, we talked.
Did we talk
that.
about Illinois officially? Okay, all right.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why I was confident that, not confidence, maybe not the best word, but that Arizona State is a decent possibility of landing there, is that I think that they are resigned to the fact that there's not going to be another actual Big Ten school that's going to be filling that 8th spot anytime soon. Illinois being the closest to that. We haven't heard any rumors about Iowa or Indiana or Purdue. Any of these other teams, I haven't heard a whiff of anything other than like Nebraska. I've heard some rumors there, but I think that'd be a tough sell with Omaha kind of right next door. So yeah,
the Omaha AD went and got the job at Lincoln, I believe.
No, it's the other way around. It was Nebraska Brad is the Omaha AD. I believe that's how it is. But I think that Nebraska Lincoln has like some decent ice facilities there. That's where Lincoln has a USHL team. I think it might be able to work there. And like I said, they are a Big Ten school. I think they have the resources to make something work. It's just I haven't heard any real steam out of that situation. But that's the only program that I've ever heard anything more than a whiff of serious rumors of them starting D1 hockey. Haven't heard anything from a lot of those Eastern Big Ten schools. So yeah, with Illinois being sort of dead and buried as far as that possibility goes, I do think that they're going to just say we need to find an 8th team. We've got to go outside the traditional Big Ten to find that team, which again, like Notre Dame joining, is another reason why I am frustrated that the Big Ten had to do that move 10 years ago to begin with. But that's again a rant for previous and future dates.
Omaha's vice chancellor of athletics was Trev Alberts, who went to the athletic director role at University of Nebraska.
Did he? Okay, so but he went to Nebraska Lincoln, correct? He was like a star linebacker, I think, back in like the early 90s. He was at Omaha though before. I think that's the case.
Well, he was the vice chancellor of athletics at Omaha. So he was and then he now is the athletic director for the University of Nebraska.
In Lincoln.
In Lincoln, yeah.
Okay. All right. But he is a Lincoln alum. He's not a UNO alum.
Oh, I have no clue, but maybe.
I'm pretty sure that's right.
Yes. Okay. Yes, that is the case.
But of the other Big Ten schools, now that Illinois is dead and buried, like I said, Nebraska would be the closest thing to that. But I haven't heard anything serious moving from that for that topic. So
yeah, and I just feel like if it's Nebraska, if it's not football, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's all right. Volleyball. I think their volleyball team is, and they have a decent baseball program. That's a topic for maybe next month. I've been somewhat getting into college baseball over this year. I went to a couple of games here. I think that college hockey could learn a couple things from college baseball, but maybe that's a topic for another summer podcast. We should wrap things up. We're getting to record territory here. Did we have any questions from our loyal fan base before we leave?
Dan Jacobson did ask if how I liked the director's cut outtakes version of Bo Burnham's Inside. Obviously, I loved it. I loved also that there were some like actual songs that just hit the cutting room floor that he did, but also some like of him just fiddling around with the lights, and you saw like the meticulous planning he did as well. I thought that was kind of interesting and kind of dove me back into the Inside and that whole project and film that he did. So I thought it was kind of cool to watch. So I was a fan of it.
Should it be though? Is it kind of misnamed though? Should it be not outtakes because it's from inside? Shouldn't it be intakes?
Intakes? Well, maybe.
I'll be here all weekend.
There you go. And there's another one about the predictions for the upcoming year. We'll put a pin in that and do that maybe when we get a little bit of a better makeup of who's the rosters for all the teams and whatnot. But there was a poll that one of our followers did. And basically it was discuss your favorite defunct hole in the wall bar in St. Cloud. And it was a one, rank. I think it was just your favorite one, but we're going to go ahead. I think we should rank them, 4-1 maybe or whatnot. Yeah. Start out with the least. But the four options were McRudy's, Rum Runners, The Rocks, and Tav. So that was combined into one, and the Press. Since the whole arson thing had to happen.
That whole arson thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if you want to go ping pong back and forth.
Well, I'll say my number 4 was a bullet right off the bat. That was the first thing that I put on my list was number 4, which is the worst of the 4.
The worst of the 4.
If you want to maybe start there and then move up, and
let's do it.
I put the Press there. Of the 4.
Really?
Yeah, wow. I could not stand the Press.
Was it the sticky floors that got to you? Was it always the bad hard rock music on the first floor, or?
Yes. Keep going. Yes.
The $1 taps that just tasted absolute garbage, like they were watered down to beat hell.
Yes.
And the 2 taps they had were Rolling Rock and McGolden, I think.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, a dive bar doesn't need all of those things. Would be fine for me if I had a good experience. I think that's kind of what I thought. Like, dive bars are fine, and I don't think. I mean, we're not talking high quality bars with any of these.
Obviously not.
I at least had some good times in the others. I can't think of one time where I'm like, I'm really glad that we had that experience at the Press last night.
Well, correct. Yeah, nobody's glad at the Press, but it was the the fish bowls, the 25-cent taco night that they had. Obviously,
you clearly went to the Press much more than I did. I probably went to the press less than 10 times.
Oh no, I went. It was a staple for me. Yeah, Tuesdays I believe it was a 25-cent taco night. So you just got a bunch of tacos that go up to the window for a quarter. Wednesdays of your birthday month, you got a pizza and a fishbowl.
Yes, I went to once.
Or a pitcher, but everyone got the
it
fishbowl because you can do like a grape ape or a water moccasin and a fishbowl with like 9 straws. The things we did pre-COVID. I tell you what.
Was there one that had like you got a tray of Jello shots? I think I remember
was at
one.
Runners.
Okay, because I think one birthday we went to several of these, and I do remember the Jello shots, and so yeah, I do think I did one of the fish bowls there for a birthday once, but
my favorite is always that you would leave, like if people would go maybe just to get the free pizza, and you'd only have like 3 or 4 friends there, and then you would get the fish bowl, and then you would only drink like half of it because after that it was just you couldn't have anymore.
All right, yeah. What was your number 4?
My number 4 was the Rocks and Tav.
I had them at 3. So they're
the Rocks always
the bottom half.
They always had a cover. And already you're going to a cover for a band, and inside the Rocks there was only usually about 5 or 6 people anyway. So, and then it was connected to the Tav. Which was just, I don't know, they had open mic night, and it was a little bit like of a convenience store vibe I always got, because they just had like refrigerator and the lights right behind it, just like you'd have at a convenience store. But it was just, there was never any atmosphere. There was just never a reason to go there. It was just kind of small and cramped in, and it was always dead inside. I remember when I turned 21 and my friends were giving me a tour of downtown. They said, "All right, you're standing outside the Rocks and Tav. All right, turn around. Here's Mexican Village. This is the best view of the Rocks and Tav. Let's go to the next bar." So the Rocks and Tav, like you said, if you've only been to the press 10 times, I've probably was only at the Tav about 4 or 5.
Yeah, I might have been there less than the press. I kind of had my usuals, which we'll get. Well, we're not talking about MCs. Obviously, that's still around.
That's still around, and that's actually Rocks a decent bar.
Yeah, and that's the bar that I'm sure I went to the most for the downtown area. Is the Rocks? Is that still that Cowboy Jack's?
Yep.
Okay.
Which it hasn't been open since the fire. And
oh, really? So that's also, but that didn't get burned down. I mean, it probably had some damage.
There was just damage to it, and I think I don't know. Like, I don't want to speculate too much, but I would imagine the owners are like, let's claim as much insurance money as we can, and let's just rebuild. Because I think they bought also some more land of that the press was on, so they expanded a little bit more, and I think they're just going to rebuild. So hopefully they rebuild to something nice, and I hope you get a rooftop patio. I think that would be really nice in St. Cloud, because we don't have one. But so we'll kind of see what happens there. But
and still nothing in the press lot. That's still just an empty lot.
That's still like charred remains. It's
really, they haven't even cleaned it up. Like it still looks like a fire.
Yeah, not really.
Wow.
To be fair, I haven't been downtown in a long time, so
some prime real estate. You think that they should do something with it? So yeah, like I said, that was my number 3. What was your number 3?
My number 3 was it was a toss up for me. But I did end up going with McRudy's. And that was kind of a surprise because, first off, the poll from Johnny Mac at Fight the Pants, McRudy's was winning. And,
really?
And I'm like, wow, people really had a lot of good memories at McRudy's. I never had. I have maybe one or two good.
I have a theory for that.
Is
And
because everyone was 18.
That's yes, because I had the number 2, so I guess you know my list now. But my theory for that is I would say it was number 2 for me, just because it was the first St. Cloud bar that I went to, and the first one that I got into, and so I think that nostalgia, it gets some nostalgia points for that reason. I think.
Gotcha.
It's maybe just a crazy theory, but that's I think why it's number 1 in the poll.
But also, that was the place after hockey home games. I mean, the hockey team usually went out after Saturday games. They went out to McRudy's because that's where your 18 or 19-year-olds could get in. I remember a buddy of mine got in with his girlfriend's ID once because, I mean, they just didn't look at it.
Right.
It was the bouncer there was more for show than anything else. Yeah, and that's, the upstairs just was cramped. It wasn't that fun to go to. Yeah, not I don't know. People put McRudy's at a higher spot than I did. That's for sure.
It's just that I was not impressed, and it didn't have good times at the Press or the Rocks. It didn't really earn second place. It was just better than
and
the worst.
Second place on this list too is meh. I mean, again, we're not talking. We're not talking the most highbrow, sophisticated restaurants in the area.
This is true. So I guess my number 1 by logic here, Rum Runners, and that leaves between your number 1. It's either Rum Runners or the Press. Which is it? I want you to say the Press, so your number 1 is my number 4.
It is not. My number 1 is Rum Runners.
So we actually agree.
We actually agree, which was actually crazy because Rum Runners on this poll was last. It only got 10% of the vote. Yeah.
Well, the beer and pizza.
The beer and pizza
was a big deal. Plus, yes. I won a poker tournament there once.
Ooh, yeah.
I won like $150 bar tab. That was the prize.
Oh, nice.
I remember I got I was holding pair of 10s, and I got another 10 on the river or the flop or whatever, and I beat a guy that had pair aces. And that's pretty much. I don't think that was the last hand of the game, but that's I got most of the chips. So that was the big turning point in the game. I just remember that the guy was not happy that I got that he lost with pair aces. But so I have some good memories from Run Runners.
Sure.
And the beer and pizza. I actually the pizza was good for the cheap stuff. I thought it was nice and good grease quotient. It was for college town grub.
And it was a good deal. It was pretty much the reason why St. Cloud instituted the rule that you can't have bottomless beverages anymore.
Yes,
is because for 2 hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays for a $7 cover, you could drink unlimited beer, and just as many times as they can serve you, really in that amount of time. And I don't know. I don't know if people weren't around for it or didn't partake in that, but that being last, I think having 18 plus night, probably didn't help. Where you would get all the Apollo and St. Cloud Tech grads or seniors there as well. But I had when we went to Beer and Pizza, which was a huge fan of mine, it was packed. You had the DJ up there, you had pretty good music, and I dancing, and on the I don't know, I had a lot of probably the most fun there. The Press it was very hit or miss for me. And it's just, sometimes I did go and I did have a really good time. Other times it was just terrible and it was just dead. So, but, everyone, remember the stairs at the press because it was probably the steepest. I mean, it was like climbing a ladder and it was single file. So, just everybody always just fell down those steps drunk because it was just a hazard. But I think Rum Runners just gets squashed in this poll, and it was
well, not in our poll.
Not in our poll, not deserved.
I think this
Put some
poll,
respect on Rum Runner's name.
I think this poll is kind of like the Us Show poll.
I think
that's the
so.
poll that doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
And it's got some biases in the poll. The poll that you want to listen to is right here on the Huskies Hockey Podcast. So, but that is that was a good topic. Riveting topic there.
Oh, just going through the list here, or the people's responses is pretty funny because one was, I've only thrown up at 2 of those bars, and I have thrown up at 3 of them. So
inside or out? Getting back to the boat.
I guess I consider like as a result of.
Oh sure. Oh well,
So,
if you're gonna count that.
Well, but still in the vicinity. Like
okay, so it's like
I
traveling.
was able to make it outside.
It's like traveling in
before.
international waters. It's like the 3-mile line outside the shore. Like that still counts as the bar.
Yeah, I say if you're still within 100 feet and you throw up of a bar that you just exited, that counts as throwing up at that bar.
I agree. I agree with that.
So yeah, McRudy's right. The tree right outside. That I threw up on that. The press, yes, both inside and outside of the press. I've thrown up on the tree and a parking meter out there. And then behind Rum Runners, in between that and like the metro station, there's like there's a little alleyway behind there. I threw up there, and that's when I said, okay, boom, I hit the reset button, let's go. And then I continued on drinking that night. If you want to, I was fun in college. What can I say?
Be sure to, this is Happy Father's Day, by the way. But be sure, when your kids grow up, be sure to regale them with all these stories of their good old dad in his glory days.
I'm just thinking the only time I would have thrown up at the Roxers have would be if I would have accidentally entered and I was around that. I probably would have thrown up in disgust.
Yes. That's good. Well, any other questions?
Nope. That about does her. For all the questions. So.
Yeah, so I guess rule changes, we're pushing that off to next month. Yeah, we obviously didn't have any shortage of topics to blather on about this week. That will do it for this podcast. Thanks to our listeners. Thanks to Better Kelp for sponsoring this podcast. And if you've made it this far, I guess you're crazy like us. So
exactly.
And send us your rankings of the defunct
bars
list.
Exactly.
If you would. Please. If you want to send a question, you can hit up Weldie at his Twitter account, which is
@more clappers, MOAR clappers, or clappers.
You can also send me an email at huskieshockeypodcast@gmail.com. Send me any questions. I love receiving them. That'll do it for this month. Until next month. Go Huskies. Woo!